evening and welcome to this South Eastern Area Planning Committee meeting on Wednesday the 26th of May 2021. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Lovely. My name is Councillor Vanessa Bell and I'm the chairman of this committee. Before we commence the business of the meeting, there are a few housekeeping issues to run through. Members, the setup for the meeting has been designed to mitigate for COVID. Therefore, can I ask all present to work to the protocols agreed at Council on 29th of April 2021 in the interest of member and officer safety. We are streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. Members and officers, during each item, please put your hand up to indicate if you wish to speak. And please bear with me because it is quite difficult to see with the screens. So wave about if you need to. I will then invite you to speak at the appropriate time. When invited to speak, please remove your mask or shout, put your visor on and speak clearly. Members, whatever you feel most comfortable with, because I know it is challenging with this mask visor business. Please reference a page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. Please ensure your microphones remain off when not speaking. Now, members, I do need to point out that the fire exit tonight is this door here. So whereas we would usually follow the running man, we'll be going out this way tonight. I don't believe there are any fire drills planned, so if the alarm goes off, it will be a real fire, so please leave the chamber. Item number 2, apologies for absence. Apologies for absence have been received from councillors R.G. Boyce, Mrs. P.A. Channer, R.P.F. Jewett and N. Schemes. Agenda item number 3, minutes of the 14th of April 2021. It is recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on 14th of April 2021 found on pages 7 to 10 are approved as a true and accurate record. I so move. Do I have a seconder?
Madam Chairman, I'd like to comment on one brief item on page 8. There was a brief discussion and Councillor Stamp mentioned she had a boat on the site and paid for it, then left the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hell, is that noted, Burnham?
Yes, Chairman. It's not, we normally just say pecuniary interest or in the middle of the minutes, but that's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, do I have a seconder for the minutes? Councillor Hell?
Yes.
Thank you. Can we agree those by assent, members, or do we need to take a vote? Agreed. Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other pecuniary interests, or non-pecuniary interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8 inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should the need arise throughout the meeting. Members, does anyone wish to declare?
Councillor Stamp.
Councillor Stamp.
Yes, Chairman, I know the applicant because it's a councillor on agenda item 6 and I'm also an Essex County councillor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Stamp. I can advise that agenda item 6 has been withdrawn.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So that brings us on to agenda item number 5. 20/01347/FUL Barn, Steeple Road, Mayland, which can be found on pages 11 to 20. So please note that the members' update in relation to this application has been circulated prior to the meeting. So if I could hand over to Ms. Staplehurst to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Planning permission is sought for the construction of a fenced enclosure to provide an all-weather surface area for exercising horses owned by the applicant. It should be noted that works on site commenced in September 2020. Please note the members' update with 2 further letters of objection. This is the location plan showing the sites outlined in red. This is the block plan showing the host dwelling on the western side and the development to the east. The development is located in the northeastern corner and would measure 21.2 metres by 40 metres. The development would be bordered by a timber post and rail fence measuring 1.3 metres high. This is the elevation plan showing the timber fence surrounding the development. Here are some photographs of the site. View 1 is from the northwest, and you can see the development is not visible as it's shielded by vegetation. View 2 is taken from Steeple Road to the north and again shows that it's not visible. View 3 is also taken from the road to the north and the development is shielded by the barn. View 4 is taken from the east adjacent to the development and you can just see it in the corner of the photo. And view 5 and 6 are taken from the west facing towards the development. The proposed development would not cause harm to the character and appearance of the area. Furthermore, subject to conditions, it's not considered that the proposal would result in material harm to the amenity of neighbouring occupiers and nor would it impact on highway safety. The application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Staplehurst. Chairman, Chairman, that's me. Yeah, talking to myself, members. Do any other officers, would any other officers like to add anything to the Staplehurst presentation? No? Thank you. Okay, members, I now open the debate and invite you to put any questions or make any comments you have on the report. Councillor Helm.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is really a retrospective planning application because most of the work's already been done. Trees have apparently been torn out and all sorts of things have happened on this site. It was sent to the enforcement officer some time ago and nothing really happened. And there's a appeal waiting on a lawful development certificate as well. So I'd like to ask the officers what they think about that and why they didn't do something about it beforehand.
Thank you, Councillor Helm. If I could pass over to you. Oh, Mr Lee, please, if you could help us with that.
Thank you, Chairman. It's an accepted point of planning that the fact that an application may be retrospective should not be a determining factor in when coming to a recommendation and decision of an application. The planning system allows for, explicitly within paragraph 73A, I think it is, allows for planning applications to be submitted to regularise breaches of planning control. Therefore, no comment in relation to that and the merits of this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Lee. Does that answer your question, Councillor Helm?
No problem, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Many other members wish to comment on this application? No, I don't see any hands. So, well, I would move to. I propose that we agree the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Beale, thank you. Members, can we agree that by assent, or do we require a recorded vote?
Recorded vote, Madam Chairman.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Bassinger, thank you. Bernard, if you could just go with me. Thank you.
Members, I will call your names. Can you please state clearly for, against or abstain, starting with Councillor Bassinger?
For.
Councillor Beale?
For.
Councillor Helm?
Abstain.
Councillor Hull? For. Councillor Stamp?
For.
Thank you, members. That's for.
Bernard?
Councillor Bell?
I will abstain. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. That's for the application, none against, 2 abstentions.
So that is carried as per officer recommendation. Thank you, members. stated previously, item 6, land north of Riversleigh, Nipsells Chase, has been withdrawn by the applicant. Members. So we move on to agenda item 7, Rosemary, Mangapp Chase, Burnham-On-Crouch. This can be found on pages 37 to 54. So, Ms. Key, if you could give you a couple of moments to get yourself ready. That's fine. We do have one public participant for this planning application. So, once Ms. Keane has presented, we will move to the speaker. Thank you, Ms. Keane.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant has applied for permission for an annex to be used by the appellant's son or daughter.
Sorry, could you speak up a little bit, please? Shout if you need.
The applicant has applied for permission for an annex to be used by the applicant's son or daughter-in-law. The applicant has stated that the building
Still can't, I'm afraid.
The applicant has applied for permission for an annex to be used by the applicant's son or daughter-in-law. The applicant has stated that the building will be occupied independently to the main dwelling by the applicant's son, and there will be no functional link to the main dwelling. Due to lack of functional link between the development and the main house, the development cannot be considered as an annex and must be assessed as a new dwelling. This is a location plan showing the proposed site outlined in red. This is the proposed block plan showing the site with the main dwelling and the existing garage to the east of the barn and the proposed development. Due to the position of the barn, the windows and doors in the southern elevation of the barn would result in direct overlooking of the main dwelling. These are the existing elevations. These are the proposed elevations. This is the existing floor plan. And this is the proposed floor plan. A scheme was previously refused at this site for a similar development for the following reasons. The proposed scheme failed to demonstrate that the development would amount to the annexed accommodation being ancillary to the main dwelling. The development was outside the settlement boundary, and the absence of Section 106 to secure a RAMS contribution. These are the photos of the site showing the barn, subject to the current application. The application is recommended for refusal as the scheme failed to demonstrate that the development would amount to an annexed accommodation that would be used ancillary to the main dwelling. It is noted that it would not be considered reasonable or necessary to condition the development to be used ancillary to the main dwelling, as it could not be considered as ancillary development due to the level of accommodation provided, its location within the site, and that it would be occupied independently to the existing dwelling on the site. It is therefore considered that a condition in regards to the building being used ancillary to the main dwelling would not meet the 6 tests as set out within the planning practice guidance and the National Planning Policy Framework, and therefore cannot be included. The proposed development would therefore be unacceptable visual impact on the countryside, a harmful level of overlooking to the amenity space of the existing dwelling, and provide a shortfall in car parking and a lack of mitigation in relation to RAMS. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Keane. So, if I could ask Ms. Taverner to read out your submission, please, and may I remind you that you're allocated 2 minutes for for public speaking in accordance with the scheme. So if you could start the timer, please, Ms. Keane.
Okay.
I believe it will come up on the screen, will it? No? Ready?
Ready? Yeah.
From now, please. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chairman. I would just like to put that straight, that the reason we're asking for this annex is because, like, one of my sons has become homeless because he was renting a house during the lockdown and it was sold. So him and his family had to move out. As I had the accommodation, we made arrangements for my other son and his wife to just share the 5 bedrooms, basically. The annex is there. It has no visual impact on anybody. In fact, it's quite an attractive building. It will extend 1.5 metres over the boundary of sustainable development, which I don't think is matter. It has no impact on anybody at all visually, and the next door neighbours are quite happy with the development. There is services are going to be totally shared by the main house. There is an access path from the east to the west past my house, and all the services, as I said, will be there. There are car parking spaces for about 8 to 10 cars, so there's absolutely no issue as far as parking is concerned. And it will also provide special housing needs for me because I'm getting old.
Thank you very much, Ms. Saviner. Thank you. So, any other officers like to comment before we open the floor? No, members, I now open the debate and invite you to put any questions or make any comments you have on the report. Members.
I'll speak then.
Councillor Stamp.
I think it's no secret that I always have voiced concerns that we don't have a policy about annexes, and I also understand that it maybe isn't joined and connected, so it could be classed or will be classed as a separate dwelling. And I know I always get told off, you shouldn't put emotion into it, Councillor Stamp, but I think on this occasion I don't agree with the officers that it is altering the character of the area. I think if anybody knows where this is, you will notice that there's been a substantial change to development and the character of that area anyway. I am cautious about whether I will agree to support the officer's recommendation or not still at this stage, so I have got an open mind. But I do feel that we need to actually have more dialogue with people. I mean, I think this is going to be a bigger issue following COVID anyway, and I think this authority and all authorities are going to have to readjust and realign. We know that the landlord's protection is ending, and I think we're going to have a serious housing crisis. Now, I know Mr. Lee is going to jump in a minute and say, Councillor Stamp, they are not planning reasons, and maybe they aren't. But I do feel very strongly that we have got to look after our residents, and I'm mindful that if we do grant a separate dwelling, it opens the floodgates. So as I said, I don't agree with the officers that it's changing the character. The next door neighbour hasn't disapproved. There's already a dwelling there. There's nothing wrong with it. They just want to extend it to accommodate a family member. And I think the applicant is true, no disrespect, and please don't sue me. She said it herself, she's getting older and she might need that support, which we all may do. I would love to have an annex in my house for my mother, which is sadly won't happen because she's too far gone with dementia now. But I mean, it would be, I think we need to look at that. So that's all I've got to say at this stage. I know they're not valid planning reasons because I haven't gone predetermined and with planning reasons, so I'll just have to think about it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. Any other members? Councillor Hale, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is all too common where families want to live together and extra accommodation and things like this. And this is going to go on and on and on because no one can afford a house now. They're too bloody expensive. Sorry. But they are. You just can't. I mean, everyone says, oh, you can buy, share, buy and all the rest of it. But you can't get on that market. So I think this is a very good idea and I would recommend against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. So I believe I'd take that first. Is that a proposal? Oh, that's a proposal,
I'll
Councillor.
second that proposal.
Yes. So do any other members? Mr. Lee?
Yeah.
Thanks, Chairman.
Sorry, Councillor Helm, if you could stop your mic, please. Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you.
I was wanting to call. She was going to speak.
Oh, sorry. To you, Councillor Hull, then, before. Thank you.
I was just agreeing with them really, because looking after my parents, myself, and lots of elderly people, we need to be looking after our families. So I support it wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Councillor Hull. Mr. Lee now, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm probably going to start with a thing that members have heard me say 100 times, if not more. You know, we are here to determine applications in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And by law, the starting point needs to be our policies. Councillor Stamp said we don't have a policy, but we do have an SPD which deals with matters such as this, and you know the officer's report in paragraph 5.1.4 deals with that and goes through latterly the various considerations, and you know we've explained why we think it falls foul various points within the 7 criteria, and if members want a bit more clarity on that, I can get Ms King's taken through that as the case officer. So you know the policy, there is a policy, and that should be the consideration where we start from. I think there's a couple other points Councillor Stamp made, potential harm in future either because of COVID or because of changes in the Housing Act and legislation, and those things could become material considerations in the future, but planning has to be based on evidence, and the fear of change in the future is not evidence, and we should not be basing planning application and determination of applications on things that we may feel. It should be on evidence and policy. So those matters should be parked when it comes to determination of an application, and that to some extent goes on to the material consideration of the point about the applicant getting older, and as Councillor Stamp I think it was said, you know, we're all getting older, but that's the point. The fact that somebody's getting older is not special, it's not very special circumstances. When it comes to personal circumstances, case law is clear that it is very special circumstances, and the applicant has actually pretty much explained in her 2 minutes that it isn't going to be used in annex. While there may be certain shared services, it's going to be a separate dwelling, and an approach such as this would be a very dangerous precedent to set for members, because for the council, because agents will use decisions we make against us, and any decision, whether it's here at committee or it's delegated, will be used against us. It doesn't matter if it's in the south, east, north, west, central or anywhere. They're the decisions of the council, and statements such as, you know, we should be allowing people to build basically annexes if there's space because it's not going to have harm, when the applicant has actually indicated that it won't be an annex, it is a separate dwelling, is a very, very dangerous precedent, because basically what we're saying is we're allowing separate dwellings if you have relatives, you know. And as I said, getting older or having children and having space and them needing a home are not what in the eyes of law would be considered very special circumstances. We all have personal circumstances, and there's a need to hit and pass a higher threshold than that, and that is something that members should be very conscious of when looking at this application. The only other point is, I think Councillor Stamp said about it being an extension to the dwelling. It's not, for clarity, and if Ms King can just explain that, just so show actually what the development is. You said extension, but you might have meant like.
I didn't say an extension to the dwelling because it's not connected.
No, it's not. That's what I just want clarity. So yeah, sorry, Chairman, but yeah, sorry, Councillor Stamp as well. Yeah, I thought you said it was an extension. Maybe that's how Councillor, maybe I just overheard that one. But yeah, I think that's everything. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Unfortunately, Ms Taverner, I'm not able to allow you to come back, so I apologise for that. So, thank you. Members, Councillor Stamp.
Can we have Mr. Lee said about the case officer giving us clarity on 5.1.4? Can we have that, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the council has a document, it's a special housing needs SPD, and if a person applies for an annex, the annex needs to adhere to the 7 different criteria within that section of the SPD, which is then run through in section 5.1.5 within the report. So the first requirement is that it's subservient to the main dwelling, and the second requirement is that it has a functional link with the main dwelling, so that the occupant would be dependent on the relatives at the main dwelling. The third one would be that it's within the same ownership, and the fourth one being within the curtilage and shared access. and that it could be transferred back into an integral part of the main dwelling at a later date when the annex is no longer required. Point 6 of the SPD states that there should be no separate boundary or subdivision, and point 7 is that it should have adequate parking to meet the needs of both the annex and the main dwelling. So these are the considerations that we have to take into account when assessing these types of applications. And if they fall short on any of those 7 points, then it doesn't meet the criteria for that, for being an annex. So as you can see in the report, it has fallen short on several of those elements.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Keane. Does that clarify?
No, sorry, Chairman, it doesn't, because I'd like it, and maybe being a little bit dense, but which ones does it fall short on? Because the only one I can see that it falls short on is that it doesn't have a functional link with the main dwelling, which is one out of the 7.
Yeah, I think possibly. Mr Lee.
Through you, Chairman. The actual, to a certain extent, it doesn't. It's a moot point how many it falls down on, because those are the points that are required for it to meet the policy. If you think that the shortfall in 1 is not, or 2 or 3 or however many is not exceptional on balance, doesn't cause harm, is a different matter. But the policy doesn't say it can only has to meet above 5 or 4 or whatever. It's required to meet all of them for it to be considered acceptable in policy terms. Ms Keane's report obviously deals with it in detail, and 5.1.5 explains how the actual impact on the character and the distance, etc., is dealt with further below in the design section, and whether it can be read as subservient. In relation to criteria 2, the applicant has acknowledged in correspondence that it would be separately by the son and wife who work. It's not dependent on the dwelling, which is a very important point. It will be used. It will be occupied as a normal dwelling. If no different to if you live next door to your parents, rather than having a symbiotic ancillary relationship that needs to be for it to be an annex, not just a close relationship. We've all know people that maybe have moved out their parents and still live a very close relationship with them, and there is a difference, and that's what you have to consider. It goes on to obviously discuss points 5 and 6 in paragraph 5.1.7, and we've raised, as that paragraph says, the existing outbuilding will form part of the annex. Whilst the building is detached from the main dwelling, it's possible for the outbuilding to be used in relation to the dwelling in the use as annex ceased, i.e. a storage room or garden room. However, given the concerns relating to its siting and separation and boundary treatment already, there is concern that it is unlikely to occur and that future occupation may not accord with 5 or 6 because of the distance and the physical relationship between the 2 properties. We've acknowledged that the parking can be met, but so the report highlights a number of points, more than just one, that where officers consider there is conflict with the criteria, and as I said, it's not a point about whether or not it's only one or the other. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Lee. Councillor Stamp, then Councillor Helm, I believe.
I'll give way if you want to go.
Councillor Helm?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This annex is connected to the house via drains, water supply and electricity supply. So there is a connection there. Thank you. And we haven't got a 5-year housing supply, have we? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Helm. Councillor Stamp?
Thank you. I totally take on board everything Mr Lee has said. But even in my short time of attending South East planning meetings, I think Councillor Helm, I was hoping Councillor Jewett would be able to come, because I can remember a discussion where there was one that wasn't subservient and it was approved. I think it was Tillingham or Bradwell, and it was down the garden. Yeah. And that was approved, and I couldn't believe that was approved, because it's similar to what we're talking about here. And I think there's more than that, Councillor Helm, that has been approved. I know that there's some in Burnham-On-Crouch that were annexes and at the bottom of the garden. They're not joined together by a glass building or anything or whatever. I totally take on board what Mr Lee's saying, and I totally understand it could set a precedent. And I think we members, we need to be very mindful of this. But there has been, it's not case law, but there has been precedent set in this district where separate dwellings have been granted in their back gardens, whether it be a long garden or not. I think it's called the nut patch or nut house, where the annex was. It's on the Malden Road at the top. Where that one, there was one at near the vicarage on Church Road. That was an annex that wasn't subservient to the actual main dwelling. That was approved on appeal. So I do think there is precedent set, especially in Burnham and I think Tillingham and Bradwell. And thank you, Councillor Helm, for supporting me on that, because he was at that meeting as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Councillor, come to you in a second, Councillor Bassinger. I just want to. Yes, that's an interesting point, Councillor Stamp, you make about one being approved on appeal. So two being approved on appeal. I'm going to go to Councillor Bassinger, then Mr. Lee. So,
thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd just like to clarify. I mean, the word connect. Are we talking about connecting? Has to be connected by some sort of glass walkway or something, or if it shares the same amenities, which I believe it does. Is that not a connection? Can we just clarify that?
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. To a certain extent, I was going to come on to that point because the reference to physical connection is actually through the old local plan policy. It's not the current policy. The current policy does allow for structures to be separate from the main dwelling, and if I'm 100% honest, I was never particularly keen on our old policy when I started, because I didn't think it's reasonable to say it had to be a physically attached. I don't have a planning principle problem with the idea of a detached annex, but I have concerns about the fact that this is not, in my eyes, legally an annex. They are not putting forward an ancillary development, and I'm very worried that, to be honest, that the statements that I've heard tonight are that if an applicant wants to build a house in their garden for their relative, that is policy compliant. That is an acceptance for the council. So I think if members are going to put forward, like we have had a proposal for it to be approved, there needs to be a reason for approval. And I just would like to get members to be very careful on how they word this, because this will be a material consideration in the termination of any future applications. And I think it's very dangerous just to reference two appeals that have happened within the district without actually, off the cuff, I don't know what they are. I can't comment about the planning history. I can't comment about the site specifics. And while obviously an annex being referred to a dwelling or an annex that's separate is a material consideration, without any details to be able to actually formally compare them and actually do a planning judgment correlation, I would be very reluctant to give them any demonstrable weight in the determination. But I'm quite worried about the ability for us to defend certain applications as a council from what's been said. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Councillor Bassinger again.
Again, I mean, it seems to be in the wording really, and I think the lady who put her case perhaps used unfortunate words. I think she was very honest, and I think perhaps she said something that made you feel as though it wasn't going to be what she is planning to do. I think we have some points covered, which we have an attachment, it shares amenities. I think Mr. Lee has admitted that we can actually provide the parking. I don't know if it has separate boundaries or not. I don't think it does. So which points are we not happy with exactly?
Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Chairman. For one point, can I just come back to what I was supposed to say the first time, but I forgot. Sorry about that. I'm getting excited just being out of the house.
Not the only one.
Yes. The point about shared facilities and something, for clarity, we have had and lost appeals where applicants have shown that for a law development certificate, that while it's got shared facilities, they had electricity, sewers, etc., that they've had somebody else living in it, and although it was granted permission as an annex, they were able to prove either 4 years / 10 years if there was a condition that it had been a breach. So things such as shared facilities and not having their own electricity bill are not things that will class this as an annex. In the big picture, but it won't stop it being used as an independent dwelling. It's how it's planning to be used, and the applicant's been clear that it's for their son and daughter that are not to have a symbiotic and ancillary relationship. The correspondence, I think Ms King might be able to take us through that a little bit more if I give a bit of a warning just to confirm some of the correspondence we've had. I think it's in the Essex report, a reference to it. But Yeah, but so I'll go back to where I was. Obviously, in relation to the point that Councillor Bassinger just raised, the policy has said, it does say about functional link, and it says that i.e. the occupant's dependent relatives, and that's obviously a key point, dependent relatives, not just relatives, or they're employed in the main dwelling. So just the functional link isn't about a physical structure or anything, it's about how it would actually react. In relation, so I can't remember what the second point was Councillor Bassinger raised.
Councillor Bassinger, would you like to remind Mr.
What was the
Lee
query,
of the
second
point?
part of the query, sorry?
No, it was just, you know, it seems as though we've covered off some of these sort of planning issues that you mentioned, the five points, and I just wondered exactly which were the other two. We seem to have sort of got three, and there were two other ones, and I just wondered what they were.
So, yeah.
I think one was about the character, and I think we've established.
Yeah, we've obviously raised concerns in relation to the character, sort of the distance, etc. See, we've raised concerns about whether it's a dependent resident, because we've been advised basically that it isn't. So there won't be a functional link to the main dwelling. So that's the first two. The main ownership, we've got no issue at the moment with that. So things can change in the future, but that's a separate matter. So that's not a material consideration. Said the vehicular access is fine, and I think there's an issue in relation to, sorry, I've just moved down, I don't know how to be used as a later date for an integral part of the main dwelling, because of the physical relationship and the boundaries. That one's a bit more of a balanced argument, because obviously it could be used as a garden room, but whether that would be what would happen is a different question. So there's concerns rather than clear conflict with that point. Obviously there is certain physical relationship that would already facilitate a subdivision, and we think the car parking's fine. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Councillor Bassinger.
So we're pretty much there. We're sort of arguing the toss about this one. I mean, in a way, I mean, is it? We're as close to saying we could approve it as much as we're as close to saying we can refuse it. Is that correct?
Through you, Chairman. Professionally, no, it's not an annex. The occupiers are not going to use the property as an annex, and that's the stumbling block in my professional point, is that, you know, it's basically a separate dwelling in a garden, for want of a better phrase. That's how the applicant's been clear they're planning to use it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Stamp, but I suppose the question that I had in my mind is if this application were the other way around and the applicant's son and daughter were in the main house and the proposed annex was for the applicant, would we be viewing this differently? Come to you now, Councillor. Sorry,
do you want me to answer that? Sorry.
Yes, please.
Through you, Chairman. You know, I'm going to say we can't work in guesstimates and assumptions, but what I would say is it needs to be a dependent relative. So at the moment, you know, I don't know anything about the applicant to comment on whether or not, but on the assumption that, on the assumption that the argument hasn't been put forward that this is needed to support the occupiers of the main dwelling. There's not a need for these people to move in as carers, for want of a better phrase. That argument hasn't been put to the council. So on that basis, I don't think that would be a difference, because it would still be an independent dwelling for an older person, rather than being an annex still. But that's based on no fact, just an assumption, and I don't like doing that for a committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Councillor Stamp.
Chairman, I'm really a little bit exasperated, because what we're actually maybe insinuating here, that if the applicant told fibs, we may grant it, because it's based on a fibbing lie, basically. And I've sat at applications where, planning meetings where applications has been approved and they've said that they want it for a relative and they've got something, and then it's been sold quite quickly afterwards because they've managed to do what they wanted to do, contrary to what we were told and have been told when we've been at this meeting. And I know Mr. Lee is going to say to me, Councillor Stamp, you can't base it on that. But I actually welcome people who actually tell the truth when they come to committees and speak to us as members and as officers. I feel quite strongly that they shouldn't be penalised, and I can see it that the young people are dependent in some ways, because otherwise they're going to be homeless. So I think there is a dependent link here, and it could be classed as tenuous, and I'm sure I'm going to get headlines everywhere Morden District Council leader's done this or whatever. But I think there is a link here, and I think that, you know, they are dependent. They're dependent because they've been kicked out. They've got nowhere to live, so they've gone back home. And the parents are trying to do the best for them. And I think it could be that they could then look after their parents as the parents get in their dotage, I think the saying is. Is there any way that we can meet with the applicant to try and make sure, to try and accommodate this? Because I feel with Councillor Bassinger the same, we're not too far away. I think it can be approved in some shape or form, that this annex could be approved for them to live in. Can that not be done, Mr. Lee?
Mr. Lee, do you want to come back? Then I'll go to Councillor Helm.
Through Chairman, from the information in front of us, I don't see how it could be. They could enter into a pre-applicant application to refuse and discuss that. The issue is that if members consider that the policy, and that then becomes the council decision, that if it's a relative and it's cheaper, for want of a better phrase, to build a house for them, that meets the special requirements, because somebody one day may need care, that also meets special requirements. We are very much watering down our policy, and we are very much allowing any dwelling, remembering that this policy is much more lenient on things such as car parking, much more lenient on things such as amenity space, much more lenient on many factors, that if we are to take a very, very low bar on certain aspects of that policy, it will make us very difficult to stop a lot of dwellings within the district, for want of a better phrase. And I just think, and these are dwellings that won't, because they're not dwellings according to our policy, will not provide, not meet anything towards the 5-year land supply, and will not, because of the scale and the numbers, we wouldn't get any NHS contribution, education contribution. So I think it's a very dangerous position, is to water down the policy with the arguments that I've heard tonight. That's all I can say, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Councillor Helm.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can Mr. Lee not limit this by conditions, so it cannot be used for anything else but this? Help you, so it can, when we go to appeal on anything else, you're protected?
Mr. Lee?
Chairman, professionally, I don't think a condition in relation to an act would be ultra virus. The applicant's clear that it's not an ancillary relationship. It is not a dependent relationship. It's just a family property, and actually an imposition invitation to an annex, I think, would be ultra virus. I think members are better off considering it's a new dwelling rather than as an annex if they were to, and arguably, but even that I still think we've been in a ridiculously dangerous position, because we haven't looked at amenity space, we haven't looked at the car park. We have actually looked at those matters, and there are problems in relation to car parking. If you did look, it's a separate dwelling. But any condition in relation to an annex, I think potentially would be ultra virus, because it is not an annex, and we can't put on a condition that isn't reasonable.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Councillor Stamp.
The actual application says extension to existing brick plinth timber frame barn to provide one-bedroom ancillary granite annex for extended family. That's what the application says. Not a separate dwelling. So I'm a little bit confused. And the other bit about not getting any contributions, please don't get me started, because I can rattle off many housing single dwellings or 5s and 6s where this council hasn't had any contributions. And I think it is a real shame that we are not supporting this application, in the fact that it's a genuine need, and for the work, it's a cry for help. They are going to be homeless, and yes, okay, it's a dangerous precedent, but I've also sat at planning applications where members and officers, maybe not members, think that dangerous precedents have been set. I think we could go around the houses all day on this. I think we're going to struggle to find out, because Mr. Lee's going to turn around and say we need a reason for approval, and I know he's going to give us a tough time, so I think we need to just, can we have a couple of minutes to think about it, unless somebody else wants to speak, please?
Mr. Lee.
Through Chairman, just for clarity, my professional advice would be the fact the applicants will be, or the applicant's children will be homeless, is not a material consideration in termination of any planning application. However harsh that may sound, in the eyes of the law, that is not a material consideration for the termination of plan application. We're here to determine in accordance with the development plan, not in accordance with our hearts. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. So, members, I think we do, as Councillor Stamp said, we could go round and round in circles for the rest of the night on this. So, members, I'm going to move to a vote unless anybody else. Councillor Veal, sorry.
Thank you. Supposing this application didn't say anything about annex and was just put forward as a solitary application for a new building there, how would we view it?
Mr. Lee, Mr. King?
Through you, Chairman. We have actually assessed that in the report because we don't consider it fall within the definition of an annex. So, and we found a number of reasons for refusal in relation to. Sorry, if I get down to the bottom of the report. Okay. Obviously, it's dwelling in a remote location. Obviously, urbanisation of the site. You know, sort of standard points in relation to a dwelling in this location. Obviously, it's also the character of the area. There'd actually be some overlooking by the relationship between the building if it was, you know, a separate dwelling. And there wouldn't be enough car parking for it, and it would need ramps, which I'm sure they'd be able to overcome. The other, can I just quickly come back on one other point about just, yes. I don't know, just Councillor Stamp's point in relation to what is put on the description. That isn't legally binding, as the man-o-man case law states. You can't bind an application by its description. You have to be able to bind it by conditions and plans, etc. So the fact that it would say on it it's an annex, if it isn't actually an annex, it's an irrelevant point. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Councillor Stamp.
Chairman, I mean, I take on board what Mr. Lee's just maybe said, but it's a bit late in the day throwing that in. I think as members we would look always at a proposal to see what the proposal was, and I'll be guided by you because you are the chief planning gentleman. But I mean, we have to be guided by what's on the report, and it does say quite clearly extension to existing building plinth and for ancillary granny annex for the extended family. Now, I think that's a debate for planning training that you can give us at a later date. But looking at the reasons for refusal, Madam Chair, I mean, I don't particularly agree with the reasons for refusal. So, with maybe some assistance from the other members, if we are still going to carry on with the vote that was proposed by Councillor Helm, I don't agree with the fact that it changes the area of the character of the area and the unacceptable impact on the countryside. So that's two reasons which I don't agree with, and I don't know if other members agree with me or not.
Yeah. Thank you. Members, I'm going to move to vote now on Councillor Helm's proposal. Mr. Lee.
We need reason for approval before we go to the...
Do we have reason for approval, members?
Just given you two.
Oh,
We've offered you conditions as well, but you didn't want to take that up.
Councillor Stamp, was that reason for approval?
Well, the reasons that I think we should approve it is based on number two. I don't think it does result in intensification of residential development and substantially alter the character of the area, and I don't believe it will have an unacceptable visual impact on the countryside through the urbanisation. I don't agree with that at all, so I don't know what policy that is because I haven't brought my LDP with me and I haven't predetermined. So, and the applicant, I think it is subservient to the main dwelling, which, well, maybe members, you don't agree with me, I don't know members, but I think on those policies alone.
It's one of those balance ones.
Yeah, it's one of those tilted balance.
So difficult balance ones, I think, on the points that you've mentioned, Councillor Stamp. Mr. Lee, can I come to you?
Yeah, through you, Chairman, just for clarity, it wouldn't be the tilted balance in this instance because it's not a new dwelling. What members are saying.
Okay,
so just no, just for clarity. It's one of the things where some confuse it. Again, I know you didn't. Yeah, it's for clarity. But there obviously is a certain level of subjectivity to certain points about whether it's subservient, whether there's impact on character to the area. I am, to a certain extent, struggling with how every other applicant wouldn't be able to use the argument that barns in their gardens can be converted, where, you know, for an annex, because there isn't additionality. And, you know, we really need to see what are the differences here to any other one. So I think we need to have a more expansion on that to give better clarity to any member, because the point of the reason for approval is that any member of public should be able to understand why members have come to a clear different conclusion to the officers. Obviously, when there's an officer's report, they've got the whole report, so a member of public should be able to clearly understand what the members thought, what was different. So, and obviously, we don't need detailed policies, so don't worry about that, Councillor Stamp, but you need enough expansion, so, and I would say to protect the council, that we can clearly explain why this is different to another one, because otherwise we will have these used against us at appeal and applications. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Stone.
Chairman, well, I'm afraid I'm going to come back at Mr Lee with what he came back at me for about not having the actual planning appeal cases. I cannot remember the Tillingham one or the Bradwell one where the separate dwelling in the garden was approved. And I think those reasons maybe could be cited at this application, Madam Chair. I'm not being difficult, I'm trying to find the actual reason. I don't know off the top of my head what they were. But that was approved, so those reasons I feel would be very similar to these reasons. But I don't know what they are, Mr Lee.
That was my thought, Councillor Stamp, actually, that it would be useful to know what those reasons were. Councillor Bassinger.
I just think that we have sort of established that there is a link, and this building is subservient because it shares the amenities with the main house. And I think if it was if it was a barn at the bottom of the garden and it wasn't sharing those amenities, then I think we could say it was just a standalone building. But because this is sharing the electricity, the water, the sewage, it certainly is linked. I also think that we've managed to mitigate the parking issue, which I think Mr Lee has agreed that we would be able to overcome that. As far as the access is also concerned, I presume there is only one access to the building. Is that correct, Mr Lee?
Yes, that is correct. There's only one access. There is a door to the front, but there is also doors that would be installed in the northern elevation.
What I was actually referring to was actually the sort of driveway entering into the area.
Yes, there's a driveway in front of the garage, and then there's another parking space in front of the house.
And there's been no sort of application to open up another entrance or anything like that, I presume?
Not under this application, no.
So again, I think we've sort of established that both parts of this, the main house and the annex, let's say, will be sharing the same drive. So there's, I think, it's pretty much a sort of a link that we can say exists there. We have the parking. It certainly doesn't seem to alter the character of the area. In fact, it may even improve it, as far as I'm concerned. And so we're sort of left with then relationship between the lady and her son. Well, are they dependent? Are they not dependent? I don't know. I think there is a dependency. Children are always dependent upon their parents for all sorts of things. They never seem to go away. Mine don't. So, and I think, if I was in that position, my children certainly would be dependent, and I am dependent on them. We are a family. We're dependents. We are family. We depend on each other. So, and I think in this case in particular, we certainly do have, a dependency issue where there is a young couple that, there obviously is overcrowding, I presume, in the house, and that's why they need a bit more space. And I think, that's a valid dependency. They are unable to buy somewhere, and so they are dependent upon their parents. And would that do, Mr Lee, in any way?
I've got to be honest, that's one of the most dangerous reasons for approval I've heard. You've basically said, yeah, the bank of mum and dad means you can build a house in your garden. So yeah, please don't use that, members. Please do not. Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, but that would really water down the policy. That reason for approval. That would be my advice. Members would, be conscious of that, because it was. Yeah, this is the issue. There is a policy requirement, and the application isn't meeting that threshold on that point, and it's very hard for us as officers to give advice on that point when our professional opinion is it is substantially short of the requirement. At the end of the day, the decision is in members. It's in your gift. It's your responsibility to come up with a reason for approval. I can only provide advice, but and I'm struggling to. Legally, I can't help anywhere near as much on a reason for approval anyway than I can a reason for refusal. That's in the case law, that's clear, but and I do try and help where I can, but irrespective that I am struggling to be able to provide any advice in this instance, in my professional opinion. Thank you.
Madam
Thank
Chair,
you.
I think in all seriousness we are having a bit of a giggle, which is brilliant. But Councillor Bessinger has raised some very valid points. If you're looking at the reasons for refusals, if you want to go down them one by one, it's very serious. The reason for refusal, one of them is parking. That's been addressed.
Yes.
Yeah. A reason for refusal was, well, I've forgotten what your other ones were. There was loads of them. So the proposed development by reason of location and the resultant intensification, which is what I said, of residential development, I don't agree with. So I think that is not a reason for refusal. And I know you've said that's, what's the word? Subjective.
Through you, Chairman, can I just not try? If members consider it's an annex, reasons 2 down just disappear anyway.
Right, okay.
Okay.
The
The reasons 2 and beyond are about the council's consideration of it as a separate dwelling. So, for clarity, if members do consider it's an annex, they would only have to talk to that reason for refusal.
So,
okay.
The others fall away. For clarity, sorry, I don't want to. Yeah, sorry.
sorry, am I being dense, Chair? So what am I looking at? So I'm looking at reason 1, am I, only?
Yeah, through you, Chairman. Obviously, the applicant has submitted an application as an annex. We've looked at it as in our policy and for various reasons do not consider it falls under the annex. Therefore, the first reason for refusal talks to that issue. Because it's not an annex, and we consider it to be a separate dwelling, and we consider it can't be an annex, we've then looked at it as in, is it acceptable to have a dwelling in that site? If members consider it to be an annex, reasons for refusal 2 through to, I'm going to say 5 off the top of the head, fall away. It's only reason 1, which is about the annex and the shortfalls with the policy. So that would be the only one that members would need to talk to in their reason for approval.
members. Councillor Hell.
I would like to move our proposal to an annex. And can we go to the vote, please?
We can, I think. Can we?
So, Chairman, we need the reason for approval. We haven't got one yet. So someone needs. Whoever's put it forward needs to put forward their reason for approval.
Councillor Helm, I believe your reason for approval was that we do believe it is, we do see it as an annex.
Yes.
Is that the case? Is that sufficient, Mr. Lee?
Chairman, we don't see that it does fail to integrate with the shared and communal garden area. We think it is part of the same space.
Yes.
It isn't separated by a boundary or anything. So I think to help Councillor Help, who's helping us as well, you know, it isn't a division of an amenity space to the southern boundary, so to speak. I don't see it is a division, personally. And I just don't agree with the reason for refusal, number 1. Sorry, Mr. Lee. I don't agree with it.
So my understanding of where we are, members, is that we are recommending approval. So we're recommending that we go against the officer's recommendation on the grounds that we do accept that this is an annex. Is that correct?
Yeah, and linked.
And linked.
Through Chairman, for
Mr. Chair,
just
yes,
for
Mr. Lee.
a little bit of help, which, you know, I said I can only do a slight little bit with
Thank you.
approval. You know, I said I'm professionally tired on that, you know.
Thank you.
But I do try and do what I can do. Obviously, if members can, to plannerise, or for what, you know, plannerlise, the phrase what you're saying, I would say is that you're trying to imply that you consider that the proposal does meet the requirements
Yes.
of the SPD. You know,
Yes.
all 7 points, as I've said, I've got some significant concerns about that, but if that's what members consider, that's up to them. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Chairman.
Councillor Stan.
Point of clarity, I thought we established you don't have to have all 7 points. I didn't think that's what the officer said. Well, we do think it meets all 7 points.
We do, members. So, Councillor Beale, before I go to
Thank you.
vote.
Been here for many, many years, and I know that over a period of time we've had many applications for annexes and everything else, and then sometime later they've been separated and sold off, etc. Can we put something in there to create a more substantial link?
I don't believe we can we, Mr. Lee? That would
There is-
require
we
a
can put
condition.
conditions about it not being able to be sold off
Yes.
separate.
So we can?
Yes,
Yeah.
which is what you said.
It's one, we can't put on, I wouldn't advise we put on the annex policy, but it ends up in a situation where they could rent it out, but they couldn't sell it.
And so we can do that?
You would still end up in theory in a rented separate dwelling, yes, but
But that would give some protection. So, Councillor Helm, is that an amendment to your proposal?
I'm quite acceptable to that, because I did ask him if he had any conditions that could help, and he didn't come up with it. Now he is. So well done, Ken.
Thank you very much.
I was asked if we could put the standard
Helm,
annex condition on, and I don't advise. Members can if they wish, but I would advise we don't. It would be ultra vires. But if members consider that it was an annex and it totally meets the requirement, then they can impose that condition. Whether or not if the applicant was ever to appeal it, it would be found to be flawed is a separate conversation. But if members think it meets the 7 criteria, they can. But as officers, we don't think it does. We wouldn't encourage that, but we wouldn't encourage the permission being granted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Members, we are saying that is what we think, yes?
Yes.
So we will then take a vote on Councillor Helm's proposal. Oh, Mr. Lee?
Clarity, Chairman, are you delegating the formation of all the conditions to officers to agree consultation with yourself?
Yes.
We need to do that as well before.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah,
absolutely. So I think we have a proposal which is that we support the application and then for Mr. Lee to consult with myself regarding conditions. Members, are we able to agree that by assent, or do we wish to have a recorded vote?
Agreed.
Are we happy to agree that by assent?
Agreed.
I believe we are, Bernard. So thank you very much, members. That is agreed. So contrary to the officer's recommendation, the application is approved. Mr. Lee, thank you very much for your support on that and your words of wisdom. Members, thank you very much for your input on that. So brings me on to agenda item 8. Any other items of business that the chairman of the committee decides are urgent, and I have none, members. So thank you again for your contribution this evening, and I now draw the meeting to a close at, I believe, 8:31 p.m.